Jim Gress held the office of sheriff in Odo County longer than anyone in history because the voters said so, but only he could define the role of sheriff for nearly 4 decades. Prior to 1983, he was working as a deputy sheriff in Nemaha County, but still had the apple orchard at Nebraska City and wanted to live closer to the farm.
So I'm going back up there. I think I'm going to try to run for sheriff up there. I said, okay, so I did. I came up, and at that time, no one knew, especially me, that Harris was in some kind of trouble.
The trouble was a diamond ring missing from a cache of evidence the Nebraska State Patrol had taken off a suspect and handed over to then-Sheriff Harris Essler. The ring was recovered, but there were questions about the sheriff's story that it must have accidentally dropped in his patrol car and never made it to the evidence locker. Despite his conviction for attempted theft, Essler still beat Gress in the election.
And, rightfully so, Harris was well liked, I mean, I remember campaigning, and even some of my own relatives said, well, I said, well, Harris can't hold a job. He can't perform the job because of his conviction. Well, we don't know that for sure. I distinctly remember that during campaigning.
Gress explains his only election defeat is saying a dispatcher named John Cole entered the race as a write-in candidate and split the anti-Essler vote. Essler's conviction barred him from holding the office, so the county board opened up applications. Gress was among 50 to apply.
The guy says, well, this is my friend. He's a law enforcement officer somewhere, and if you'll withdraw your application for appointment, he guarantees you'll be chief deputy. I said, well, I don't want to be chief deputy. I want to be sheriff. And I said, I'm not doing that. And here again, I don't even recall who those people were.
He said seeking the job was one thing, but now he had to find out how it was done.
From Commissioner Pat Ramel said they selected me to be sheriff. I said, what do I do now? I said, well, show up for work tomorrow. I said, okay. But that's how it all went.
Gress never met Carl Ryder, who served as sheriff from 1923 to 1950. Ryder, the son of William Ryder and Eliza Hinkston of Dunbar, worked on an Odo County farm from 1904 to 1922. The newspapers roared with headlines about the lawman. Once, after releasing the last inmate from the county jail, he told a news reporter that now he can concentrate on the next man.
They said he was a great sheriff. He spent a lot of his time, he said, back in those days, Saturday night was the night when the stores were open in Nebraska City, and like us being farmers, we brought our cream and eggs to town and dropped them off, and then my mom and them to go grocery shopping. But he always talked about Carl Ryder sitting on Main Street in his car watching the people and talking to them.
Ryder told the newspapers during the Prohibition era that the famous bootlegger and kidnapper George Kelly Barnes, nicknamed Machine Gun Kelly, was sure to make his way to this area. He said his men needed firepower to stand up against the Thompson machine gun that made Barnes famous.
When I took office, Odo County did own a Thompson machine gun, and a company out of Kansas City had made a deal with Harris Essler, because he was actually sheriff prior to me, to trade that machine gun in on some semi-automatic high-powered rifles. And the machine gun didn't work anyway. But anyway, they want to know if I'd still honor that trade. And I said, sure, I'll honor that, because Odo County really never had no weapons at all. The deputies furnished their own weapons, whether there be a high-powered rifle, shotgun, handgun.
Ryder served 27 years and 1 year in 1955. Gress was in office 36 years.
I never was afraid, I guess. I shouldn't say that, but I get called out at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I went to one incident, and 2 guys each had guns. Like, I'm not going to get into that, but I forgot to take my gun belt. But no, I never really did feel endangered. Another time I had a guy on a county road, minimum maintenance. My other deputies, well, Mike Holland was one of them. They were down looking for him down in the Burr area, and I just happened to run into his vehicle. I started to chase him, and he stopped on a hill, and he had a shotgun hanging out the window. But I never felt I was back far enough, and through training and all, I never really felt. When the guy left the road and went up into the field, and I started into the field, I said, "No, I'm going to wait for help." I backed out. Common sense. You just think about it. I'm not brave or anything. I just never thought about it. It was just a job.
He started with 3 deputies who were jailers in the basement of the Otoe County Courthouse and a handful of dispatchers.
Within the first year, I thought I was going to resign because I was also the county coroner, and so I was working day and night basically, and I kind of figured up my wages, and I was probably making less than $1.50 an hour, if you figured the time. Every deputy that I had was scheduled to work, which was only 3, work 72 hours a week on their schedule. Now, they weren't actually physically out there, but they had to be on call, but they were still probably working physically 50 or 60 hours.
Gress said state-imposed jail standards convinced county commissioners to add staff.
Not my decision, but it still was a good decision because we just needed it,
Gress said there were many times in the early years when the county jail was empty. When the new jail was built with a capacity for 21 prisoners, he was told it would last 40 years. The county is now spending about $20,000 a month to hold prisoners out of county.
The crimes we had back then, it seemed to be different than the crimes we have today. Towards the end of my career here, I didn't see the break-ins at the bars and the businesses out in the county as we did in the early years. Like I said, the crime change, if you see, and you see it as much as anybody, is a lot of it is drug arrests, the marijuana, the meth, the cocaine, and those things lead to other crimes like domestic violences that we have now, and just, computer crime we didn't have computers back then, so now, you have child pornography on the computer, and people are doing that, and there's arrests made on those type of things. But with the technology we have today, we're solving a lot more crime, but we do have a lot more crime, and a lot of it is connected back to the drugs.
Gress said law enforcement techniques have improved over the years, but there seems to be a trend for a different type of community policing that he knew.
The main thing, you got to keep your common sense. That's one thing it's hard to find anymore. But keep your common sense and stay calm. Everything will work out. Don't get excited. And when I see this on TV, I just seen one this morning, where they're jerking somebody out of a car and they're throwing one on the ground, and why would you do that? They got cameras rolling. There's no reason to do that. You got backup. I might see that if I was there one-on-one, it might be a little bit where you'd have to, make sure the guy's down and handcuffed, and so you might use a little more excessive force if you're one-on-one, but I don't understand why they do that.
Gress said he believes he had success at the election polls because of the years he spent going out on calls in the county and mingling with the people. He offered his endorsement for new sheriff Colin Cottle.
What I like about Colin, he's highly intelligent, and he has common sense, and what I've seen, he stays calm, and he's kind of like, he's one of the guys, and he's not, to back up a little bit, putting on the badge of sheriff, I never felt anything different than when I was a deputy in Nemaha County.
Sheriff Gress was honored with a reception at the Nebraska City Firefighters Museum on Saturday. From Nebraska City, I'm Dan Swanson, News Channel, Nebraska.